Cool. So looks like I'm the last one. So
No, Mohammed's not here, is he?
He's here.
Yeah.
I am here.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, everyone ready to begin?
Yep.
Great. Without further ado, let's go ahead and begin this meeting of the Albany Planning and Zoning Commission for Wednesday, June 22nd, 2022. It is 7:01 p.m. And I'll note that all of the commissioners are present for the record, and I will read the land acknowledgement. The City of Albany recognizes that we occupy the land originally protected by the Confederated Villages of Dijon. Excuse me. We acknowledge the genocide that took place on these lands and must make strides to repay the moral debt that is owed to this indigenous people, specifically the Ohlone tribe. We thank them for their contributions, which have transformed our community and will continue to bring forth growth and unity. The City of Albany commits to sustaining ongoing relationships with the tribe and together build a better future for all that now make this their home. So that takes care of items 1 and 2 on the agenda. Item 3 is ex parte communications. Are there any commissioners with ex parte communications to disclose?
No.
Okay. Hearing no's and seeing head shakes, I have none either. We will move on to the consent calendar. It will be enacted in one motion unless a member of the public or a member of the commission pulls an item for discussion. We have 2 items, the meeting minutes and design review and parking reduction for a single-story rear addition at 907 Ventura Avenue. Would any commissioner like to pull one of these items for discussion or comment?
Not I. Mm-hmm.
Okay, seeing none, are there any members of the public who wish to pull a consent item for discussion before the vote? Raise your hand at this time. And we'll give you countdown 3, 2, 1, and I see no raised hands. So we'll bring it back to the commission. May I have a motion, please?
I'm happy to move approval of the consent calendar for June 22nd. And I can say there's 2 items on there. That includes the minutes from May 25th and the planning application 22033, design review and parking reduction for a rear addition at 907 Ventura.
Thank you, Commissioner Donaldson, for that motion. And I believe I heard Commissioner Waddy is with the second.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So I will ask if there's any dissent from any commissioner to approving the consent calendar. If there's no dissent or abstentions, yes, go ahead, Commissioner Moomin.
Yeah, I will abstain from voting for 4-1 since I was not present in the meeting.
Okay. Any other no's or abstentions? Okay, let the record show that the design review and parking exception for 907 Ventura Avenue was moved unanimously, and there were 4 votes for the meeting minutes with 1 abstention by Commissioner Moomin. Okay, thank you. Now we're on to any announcements or communications from staff or commissioners. There are none listed on the agenda. Are there any last minute announcements?
I do have one announcement. Commissioners, we're hoping that we'll be able to schedule a special meeting in July to consider the draft housing element. In particular, the date that we're looking at is Tuesday, July 19th. We'll finalize that in the coming week or so, but I just wanted to make that announcement now. I understand that Commissioner Waddy will not be available for that. I'm sorry. But I believe we'll have a quorum of other commissioners, and hoping that we'll have a quorum of other commissioners that will allow us to allow the commission to take action on a recommendation on the draft housing element.
Okay, thank you. And I believe I responded, and I believe I responded that I can attend. And are there any other announcements from commissioners or staff? If none, I'll go ahead and move to public comment. So this is the period of the meeting where persons desiring to address the commission on an item that is not on the agenda may do so. And I do see one raised hand from the public for items not on the agenda. So if staff would please let that person in.
Jeremiah, you have 3 minutes starting now.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. I hope everybody's doing well. Sorry for the noise. I'm here on Solano, the frozen yogurt shop, Parklet right now. I just want to say a few things here. It's been brought to my attention that people are getting evicted in Albany for apparently no apparent reason. People are faced with the fear of being homeless and eviction. And I just don't really see a lot being done in Albany to protect tenants. There's, of course, Albany Cares, Project Hope. There's certain things. There's Echo Housing and all that jazz. But it's really kind of depressing in a way that a lot of our community members are getting evicted. There's probably community members that are getting evicted that are unseen or unheard. A lot of Albany community members may not know where to go, what to do. I was at the post office the other day mailing something, and I was talking to someone outside, and they said that they had just got an eviction notice from their landlord for no apparent reason. I guess this person is really quiet, and I don't really know what's going on. So I recommended some emails. You probably got to email yourself. Jeff Bond, I don't know if you've heard what's going on, but I'm just really concerned about these evictions and resources in Albany. I just don't know what to do. I mean, I care about everybody in the community. Of course, it's taxing on my mental health because I feel for other people. So I don't know what this commission's going to do, but maybe you can respond to people that are emailing you, and Jeff Bond, really help these people out. It's not fair. I mean, these people aren't homeless yet, but if they do get evicted, now they're homeless in Albany. And I was pretty sure that there's still like a no eviction memorandum right now because of COVID. So please do what you can for Albany residents. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. And I don't see any further hands raised for public comment at this time for items not on the agenda. So I will close this item at this time and move on to our next item on the agenda, our most main substantive item on the agenda, which is the San Pablo Avenue Specific Plan, item 7.1. And take it away, staff.
Thank you, Chair Pilch and Commissioners. My name is Jeff Bond. I'm the Community Development Director for the city. I'd like to give a brief introduction and then turn it over to our consultant team to give you a detailed presentation. Just to kind of give you some context for where we are in this project. As the Commission knows well, the state legislature has been passing a variety of laws in recent years that are addressing the availability of housing in California and the importance of cities to facilitate the improvement and development of housing for all segments of the society, taking into economic consideration, economic diversity and racial justice considerations really for the first time, I think, in recent years at least. The result is that cities throughout California are required to plan for housing, much more housing than we've ever had to plan for in the past. And this is particularly through our housing element process, which we're kind of working on in tandem with the specific plan. And these long-term plans are compelling dramatic changes to our local zoning ordinances. To the state's credit, they have provided funding to help us with this planning. And the specific plan that's before you this evening is the beneficiary of that. In 2017, the state legislature passed Senate Bill 2, which included funding to prepare specific plans such as this. In our particular case, we've received over $220,000 in grant funds for this project. In 2019, the City Council held a series of meetings to discuss the grant application and the scope of work that ultimately has led to where we are today on this project. Before I turn it over to our consultant team, I do want to mention a little bit the schedule that we're working on. And this is kind of bringing the housing element and the specific plan together. Our schedule objective is to be able to bring this specific plan to the City Council next month before their August recess. This allows us to incorporate the conclusion of the specific plan into the draft housing element, which we also need to complete by the end of July in draft form and send to the state for their review. So ideally, the commission can take action this evening on making a recommendation to the City Council. If not, we would hope that any additional items that might need attention or discussion can be brought back to you at your next meeting on July 13th. We think we can kind of squeeze it in, but hopefully it would certainly be easier for us and a little bit smoother transition if we can have a recommendation out of the commission this evening. I realize that there is a great deal of information here. A lot of it is new to you. So we appreciate whatever you can accomplish this evening. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Jean Eisberg, who's the principal of Lexington Planning, and Jane Lynn, who is principal with Urban Field Studio, who can provide you details of what you see this evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chuck, and good evening, Chair Pilch and members of the Commission. So I'm just going to give a fairly short presentation, about 10 minutes. We may have some people joining that haven't listened to some of these presentations before. So I'm going to provide an overview of the project and the specific plan, and then highlight a few items that are new to the Commission since we last met in March. And so I'll talk about the context for the plan, the vision and objectives, the process and the timeline, and then go through the components or attachments to the staff report. And this includes the specific plan, the design guidelines and objective standards, the general plan amendments, zoning amendments, and the community benefits and the addendum to the general plan EIR. And then we'll just wrap up with the next steps, which Jeff just indicated. So as we discussed, the objective of the general plan, the objective of the specific plan is really rooted in the general plan, which talks about the transformation of San Pablo Avenue into a mixed use boulevard from the existing commercial uses, so more pedestrian oriented and this larger mix of uses. And so the vision for the corridor is more or less set, but the existing zoning standards do not align with that vision. And so the vision shown on the screen here talks about transforming this into a walkable, transit-oriented, sustainable, livable community that still reflects Albany's identity. And to add to the public realm with attractive building design, encouraging social activity, and economic, racial, and ethnic diversity through a range of housing types and household, accommodating different types of households and integrating those with commercial uses, including retail, services, and restaurants. This is the planning area. It extends from the city's southern to northern boundaries and to Adams Street to the west and Keynes to the east. So community engagement throughout the process, we've been working with the Planning Commission through a number of study sessions. We had a virtual open house over the winter of 2020-2021 with over 400 participants. We are in the midst of a tribal consultation. We did get a request for tribal consultation, and public notice has been provided most recently for this meeting to the entire planning area plus a 300 foot distance from the planning area. And then lastly, we have a project website that served as a sort of library of documents. The repository of information for the Planning Commission meetings, draft documents over time. And so we encourage folks to check that out as well. And this just summarizes in a timeline where we've been and the topics that were reviewed at each of the study sessions with the Planning Commission, leading us up to the adoption hearings this month and next month with the Council. This is the table of contents from the plan. So this is just indicating the key topics, and that's land use. As Jeff indicated, the plan is really focused on housing. And so primarily in terms of land use, we're talking about housing as well as the ground floor retail requirement. Chapter on urban design and a compendium document that I'll mention just in a minute. And then we have a chapter on infrastructure and mobility, as well as an implementation section. Key changes include revisions to the general plan land use map shown here, as well as changes to the zoning district map and the overlays map. There was a request to show what these standards could look like in terms of the 5, 6, 7 stories anticipated by the new zoning standards. And so you'll see this is an excerpt from the plan itself, the types of projects that are being built on 100-foot depth lots in surrounding cities. These are showing Oakland and El Cerrito examples. The staff report summarizes some key changes to the plan since the Commission reviewed it in March. And so I'm going to summarize them again here. And these are based on straw polls by the Commission and by the Council later in March. And so these have resulted in changes to the plan. So first, clarified that ground floor commercial development is required along the corridor, except on sites with 100% below market rate housing. Second, we've removed the policy that expanded the use of the affordable housing fee in lieu, which means that primarily we would expect the inclusionary housing requirement that's on-site BMR units, below market rate units, those would be provided on-site as opposed to a fee in lieu. Third, we expanded the northern node. This is where taller heights would be permitted close to transit, the BART transit in particular, to include the southeast corner of Brighton and San Pablo. And then the next 3 bullets, we've relocated the community benefits and the zoning changes that were previously in the plan. We had detailed standards about what those would be. We've relocated them to their own documents that I'll mention in a minute. In terms of urban design, likewise, we've relocated the design guidelines and design standards that were included in the plan in March to their own compendium document. And then lastly, in terms of infrastructure and mobility, we proposed to reduce the parking requirements. So we prepared zoning amendments to require a maximum of 1 space per unit and a minimum of 0 spaces, so no minimum parking requirement. And then lastly, added transit policies based on feedback from the Transportation Commission. So there is a new document in your packet. The information within it is not new, but it's got a nice new cover and it's in its own document. And these are the design guidelines and objective design standards. This document would replace the existing San Pablo Avenue design guidelines. It's in a separate document because the intention is that it can be more easily updated over time by resolution as opposed to amending the specific plan. And so we expect this document to be used during design review for individual projects. So it would be used by property owners and developers, as well as for the Commission to make a recommendation on the project, take action on the project, and for the community to understand what the city's priorities are and what the requirements are for development. So new in your packet are amendments to the general plan. These are shown in red line format, so it highlights places where we're proposing amendments. It also highlights places where the specific plan is emphasizing or implementing policies in the general plan. And so you'll see both strikeouts in specifically around development standards, because FAR and height are mentioned in the general plan, and changes to the general plan land use map, as I said earlier. And then again, you'll see annotations that talk about how the specific plan is helping to implement those general plan policies. There are no substantial policy changes proposed beyond those changes to development standards. And then second, we previously had zoning amendments listed in the specific plan. We had sort of a note saying that we were going to ultimately take them out, and we've done that at this time. And so the zoning ordinance amendments, you'll see the red lines there. We've tried to maintain the current organization of the city's zoning ordinance. So that means we've maintained the table structure where you have development standards by individual districts. We have not created a new overlay that would change the way the city currently lists development standards. So as a result, you see a lot of footnotes, you see exceptions to general rules that would apply on San Pablo Avenue versus in other locations. And so for that reason, we annotated the zoning amendments so it's easier to follow along what those changes are. So in the margin of that document, you'll see a little bit of a guide to what these footnotes and zoning changes really intend to do. So the next attachment is the community benefits. These again were previously listed in the specific plan. These are objective requirements for all development in the corridor, as well as objective requirements for community benefits that get triggered when you have a building in that 85-foot height limit. We have gotten some feedback from a property owner that we need to better clarify how those requirements come into play on 85-foot, where 85 feet is allowed, in particular because many times in those locations, a building that's abutting Adams or Canes would need to be reduced down to 50 feet. So we do need to clarify that going forward. But this community benefits document is intended to, again, be adopted by resolution so that it can be adjusted over time. So for example, we have a standard or a benefit option around solar panels. Currently, those are required for buildings up to 3 stories, but not for the buildings above 3 stories. And so if that changed in the building code over time, it would no longer need to be a benefit if it's required. And so that's the type of thing that may change over time. And so rather than amend the specific plan, again, it would be this separate document. And lastly is the CEQA analysis. So we prepared an addendum to the general plan EIR. This assesses whether impacts from the specific plan would create any new or substantially greater impacts compared to what was assessed in the general plan and general plan EIR. And so this analysis includes all of the CEQA topics as well as new CEQA topics that have been identified by the legislature since the EIR was adopted several years ago. It also includes a number of appendices with technical studies that focus specifically on the specific plan. And so this analysis finds that the specific plan would not result in any new or substantially greater impacts than those assessed in the general plan EIR. So there's 3 actions proposed for the commission. The first resolution is to recommend adoption of the general plan amendments in the addendum to the EIR. The second resolution is to recommend adoption of the specific plan, the design guidelines and objective standards, and the community benefits. And then the third resolution is to recommend adoption of the zoning amendments. So as Jeff indicated, the next steps after tonight are to go to City Council on July 18th, and we would take any comments as part of the motion, any comments that the commission has on the plan or on any of these documents to the council for their consideration. Also tonight, we are taking public comment. We've received several written comments in response to the staff report and attachments. Several comments related to concerns about overhaul building height, concerns about transitions to lower density residential, a desire for citywide for planning changes, zoning changes to take place rather than focusing all of height and density changes on San Pablo Avenue. And I'm happy to answer any questions. That concludes our presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have just a few questions to start with, just about materials, really. Would you actually put back the slide that shows the changes, the most recent changes? I think that would be very helpful to look at. So I think most of these were changes that came from, so one question is, are most of these changes ones that came from the commission, with the exception perhaps of parking, which was finalized by the city council? Would that be fair?
We asked the council to weigh in on all of the changes that the commission had recommended because we did not change the draft between the commission hearing and the council hearing. So those were all corroborated. So I would say that the straw polls indicated changes to both ensuring the ground floor commercial, affordable housing, and the parking.
Okay. All right. And I see the rest of these plans are it's just moving material around between different documents. Okay, great. And then are these slides up on the website yet?
They are not, but I will make sure they're up there, if not today, by tomorrow morning.
Okay. All right. It would be okay. So just parking, transit policies, added transit policies based on Transportation Commission. Okay. We might keep this slide handy. It might be useful to refer to later as well. And another, and a question about whether or not the design guidelines and the objective design standards, were there any additions or changes to those since the last time we looked at those?
There were changes. We had a number of comments, I would say more from individual commissioners, and maybe Jane can pipe in. And so we did make a number of changes. Some of that was making sure that we have design guidelines. Those are subjective, that our objective standards are really objective. There was nothing, I don't think that's too controversial, but maybe Jane can give us a little sense of what we changed there. I remember many open space, clarifying driveway widths and when parking,
yes,
parking design standards.
Jeannie's right. Well, first of all, it used to be its own chapter in this specific plan, but we decided to move it out, so it is now in its own document. And the way it was organized was changed as well, but it's essentially the same stuff, but it has also a little more clarity on some of the objective design standards versus what is guidance. So that's really what has been the main changes for the objective design standards and design guidelines.
Okay, thank you for that. Yeah, I do remember discussion at the last one of our last meetings about the design guidelines and standards. And final kind of logistical question: can you explain the reasoning for the 3 different resolutions?
Sure, I can start, and then maybe Jeff can weigh in. But we want to take action on the CEQA document and the general plan amendments first, because we do, and I know this is something that's come up in previous meetings, the specific plan needs to be consistent with the general plan. And we can amend the general plan, and then we ensure that the specific plan is consistent with it. So we recommend doing the general plan action first. We always do the CEQA action first. That's sort of part of the clearance to make sure that as you're making a discretionary approval, we have completed the necessary CEQA approval. And then in terms of the zoning amendments, I think it's possible those could have been included with the plan and the design guidelines, but it's a little bit of a separation between everything that's associated with the specific plan versus the zoning ordinance that's a citywide document.
Right. I don't, we did consult with the city attorney on this as well, just to make the commission aware, to make sure she was comfortable with how we're breaking this up into pieces. I mean, some of it's just kind of mechanical parts of this. For example, a zoning ordinance, we send the ordinance to a outside consulting service that actually drafts our municipal code. And it's a lot cleaner to just have them give them a standalone zoning ordinance amendment resolution, not include all this other design stuff, because they won't know what it is and they'll put it in the ordinance where it doesn't belong, and then it's a big mess. So the general plan, the CEQA work, as Jeannie said, are the preliminary big picture decisions. And then the zoning ordinance is a standalone because it's cleaner. And then everything else is kind of in between.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that. That helps very much. Thank you. And that does it for my questions at this time. Let's go to Commissioner Donaldson with his questions.
Oh yeah, thanks. Let's see. First of all, I have issues and concerns about the specific plan, as you all know. But I do want to thank staff and thank Jean and her crew for all the hard work that you've put in. It was a really large file that we received for this meeting, hundreds of pages actually, and I could see that a lot of thought and effort went into pretty much every part of it. There's a lot to like about the specific plan in terms of how it's put together, the formatting, the communication skills that go into it, and I applaud that. Even though there are parts of it and some of the policies that I don't like at all. So thank you for that. It is, I really can recognize and appreciate all the work and effort that went into pulling it together. A question I have, you mentioned the straw poll. I think I remember that at the Planning Commission. I think I voted, I was one no vote on some of those items for sure. Explain to me what happened at the council. You did a similar straw poll at the council level? That's one question I have, and talk about that. And the other question I have is, did you say there were 8 letters of comment that had been received today or yesterday? I only got 2. And I'm hoping that they got circulated to the commissioners. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'll start with the second question first. I didn't mean to say 8 if I did. There are a number that are currently on the agenda packet. There are 5 written comments online on the agenda packet. And I think that reflects, Jeff, the comments received.
Well, I think
and we'll continue to put any written comments onto.
Yeah, I received 2 by email today that came from the city, and so okay, I understand now. Thanks. Mm-hmm. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then in terms of the council meeting, so we brought the plan as it was drafted in February. We brought that to the council, and then we brought to the council the Planning Commission's comments, and so we did do some straw polling around, or we really didn't end up doing the straw polling because we had asked very specific questions about their feedback on the issues that the commission had given us feedback on. And so the council members did indicate their preference around parking, around the affordable housing fee versus on-site. And so based on the comments that we got from each council member, that did make a change in the direction of the parking in particular and the affordable housing on-site versus in lieu in particular.
Yes, I was muted. Thanks. Mm-hmm. No.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Moomin.
Thank you. I can't agree more with Commissioner Donaldson about the efforts the design team has and the planning staff has put in preparing this specific plan document. I don't have any procedural questions. I have some specific question. I'm happy that City Council preferred on-site inclusionary housing. I had mentioned that in the last meeting, my preference for that also. In the updated specific plan document on page 31, I see one paragraph, LU5, affordable housing, that refers to that, but it's not very clear about the preference for on-site inclusionary housing. And I also looked through zoning amendments, but I could not find any reference to that language. I would like to know which page that is marked up.
So to clarify, the way it works now is the city requires the 15% inclusionary requirement to be located on site. And the city does not have a fee to set up for a payment in lieu. And so someone really needs to request it, or it's used as a remainder if they're providing an odd number or a fractional unit. The previous version of the plan had suggested doing that study, identifying or updating that study to identify the fee. And so we've taken that out. And so you don't see specific language reinforcing the idea of on-site. It's just that's the way it works now. And so there's no change to the way that it works now.
Okay, I understood that, but then the language that you have currently on page 31 is not very clear about the preference.
Okay.
It's still very vague, if that is the direction you have received from City Council.
Okay.
And then my next question is about, this is again very specific, not about any larger policy. On page 29, we have this plan that shows opportunity sites, which mostly covers the sites that are part of 2015 to 2023 housing element cycle. And for the next housing cycle, we have added another 9 sites, opportunity sites on the specific, within the specific plan boundary. And so I'm wondering, so I particularly don't know, if is it possible to indicate some of those sites that would be part of the next cycle actually, because this 2015 to 2023 cycle is going to be outdated next year anyway. And so in order to, highlight the importance of the opportunity site within the specific plan, I think it would be helpful if we include the site that we have recently selected for the next cycle.
Yes, thank you for raising that. And I know you've raised that before, so I apologize it's not updated yet, but we do now have the data from the housing element, and it sounds like those sites are pretty much final. And so before we adopt this, we can replace the figure 2.2-8 potential build out areas. And then the only change to that will be the hashed housing element opportunity sites. It's going to say something like, I think it's 2023 to 2030. And it, as you indicated, it's primarily the same sites, but there are some additions. And for our purposes, we're not calling this map an opportunity site map anymore. We're talking about it as potential build out areas. We don't know where development may go, but I hear your comment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And then my last question is about objective standard BD 50 on page 27 of objective standards document. In our last meeting, I had raised my reservation about openness. This standard allow 40% of the open space to be covered with a permanent weather protection. And I am personally not very comfortable with that. First of all, we reduce the per unit required open space from 200 to 100. And if 40% of that is going to be covered permanently, not awnings or trellis, but like permanent weather protection, then I don't think that would be very desirable. And that's what I had mentioned in our last meeting, and looks like you have kept that provision unchanged. So I would like to know the rationale behind it.
I wonder if it was just a miss, because I think there was a consensus on the commission to change that.
Yes, I believe that. I think that was missed, so I apologize. We'll make that change. And so I just wanted to ask a clarifying question on if you're open to any part being covered. And so if there's if your desire is really for 100% not covered.
No, typically, the projections like balconies are permitted, to encroach into the open space. And sometimes some design guidelines specify the maximum depth of the balconies, but they are not like, continuous. They are kind of, are like separated from each other. I don't want to be too specific and too, constraining in that regard. People can have as deep as, balconies as they like. So we may just, specify that projections are permitted, but like being specific about max, up to 60% can be open to sky and 40% can be covered. Maybe I think to extend, excessive in my opinion, because 40% of that open space, if it is like, in a covered area, it will not look, an open space. And then it also would not help growth of landscape and plantation, planting and things like that. So maybe we might update, revise the language that would allow projections rather than saying like covering it is permitted.
Okay. That's a great suggestion. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. And yeah, I'll echo Commissioner Momin and Commissioner Donaldson as well that, yeah, one of my first thoughts of seeing the packet was about the amount of work put into this. So thank you to staff and consultants for all that. There's so many details to cover. Impressive. I will note about the letters. Unfortunately, I only received one letter in my inbox, and I just, while others were talking, I just investigated that. It looks like one of them went to the email address planning@Albany CA, which does not go to the commission. So that's why some of you might not have received that one. So I would take a look in your in the online packet to make sure you've seen that one, fellow commissioners. And I would ask staff in the future if that happens to, if you would make sure to forward it to us, or if you did, my error. And then 3 of the other ones unfortunately went to my spam boxes, so I've retrieved them now, but I'll be catching up with those during the meeting. So apologies to the public for having missed some of those comment letters. And let's see, Commissioner McLeod, you have your hand up. Please go ahead.
Yeah, good evening. I agree with the statements about how great this plan looks in terms of preparation and its readability, legibility. And I also think it's a good idea to be separating the various pieces. I really don't have much in the way of questions, except that I was looking at the zoning resolution and I didn't see an attachment 10, I think it was referenced, just to clarify. Maybe I missed it, but I mean, that was really it, just to see if there was an attachment 10.
Let me take a look at my notes. I did see an attachment 10, the map.
Did I miss it? It's possible.
Yeah, let me take a look at the latest. Yes, it does seem to be there in the latest online agenda.
Oh, mine stops at 9. That's weird.
There's,
okay.
Yeah, there's attachment 10, 11, and then 5 letters of correspondence after that.
Oh, I don't have 10 or 11. Maybe, oh, it's weird.
It may be the way the web page sorts this. It sorts by the first letter. So at least as it shows on my screen, it says attachment.
Oh, I see. They're up earlier. Okay,
Yeah.
Sorry. They're out of sequence. All right. Sorry.
Gosh. Yeah, okay, they show in the right order.
All right, right. Screen. Okay. My.
That's fortunate.
Sorry. Okay.
All right.
That's it. Thank you.
Okay. Great. I think I have some. I have some questions, but they're more probably we'll get into discussion and comments, so I'll leave those for later. Any final questions from the commissioners before we go to public comment? If not, please raise your hand if you intend to speak on this item. And I see we have 21. We have 32 participants in this meeting. 32 participants, 21 attendees total. And so far, 2 people have raised their hands. It doesn't look like we'll have many commenters. I'll go ahead and leave the comment time at 3 minutes. Okay, we now have 4 hands raised. I think this is an important document and it deserves the 3 minutes. But if you do want to abbreviate and just agree with the previous speaker, feel free to not use up your full 3 minutes. And with that, staff, please let the members of the public in.
Sure. First speaker, Jeremiah.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you again. So I was just really curious about a few things. Do you remember in the beginning of the meeting where you read the statement about the commitment to the Ohlone culture and how everything we do is supposed to be working toward strengthening relationships with the Ohlone tribe, Native American Indians? So I didn't hear one thing on this whole presentation regarding the Ohlones. So I'm wondering, has anybody even reached out to the Ohlones? Has any one of you contacted anybody from the Ohlone tribe or Sagorate Land Trust or anything? I'm really concerned because you read the statement in the beginning, but then the meeting goes by and you kind of forget everything, why we're supposed to be doing everything. We have a flag flying high at the city hall, and we have a statement read in the beginning of every single meeting. So have you even consulted anybody from the Ohlone and what they want? I mean, I'm just saying, because we got to be a little bit more mindful in our decision making, because we are building on borrowed land. This is not our land. They were here first, and we came over and bullied them out. So I'm just really concerned about everybody's priorities. So with that said, someone please consult the Ohlones and come back with something to present to City Council saying this amount of housing is available for Ohlone people. Okay, so that's just a big point I want to remind everybody, just in case you forgot. And maybe on every single building you can have an Ohlone artwork or a Ohlone flag on one of these. So a couple other things is, you guys keep talking about parking. There's such a pattern in this commission about parking. You always waive the parking. You always waive the parking. I mean, the one up on Solano, waive the parking on that. So when is parking going to come in? I'm really concerned about the parking situation. So you got to offer parking in the basements on every single one of these. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Jeremiah must have missed it, but there is a Native American consultation going on, and Jean reported that in her opening statements. I just want to make that comment for the record. Thank you. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Yes, I was going to acknowledge later as well, but thank you, Commissioner Donaldson. Next speaker, please.
Next speaker, Clay Larson. You have 3 minutes.
Hi. So in the past, I've talked about many aspects of this whole process. I call it Albany's big lie, Albany's version of the big lie. That this is actually, this process is realizing some vision in the general plan. I talked about the fact that the notion that the specific plan is modifying a general plan is backwards. Now we're going to use parliamentary trickery to correct that. But today I sent an email. Today I want to talk about CEQA actions, and I sent an email describing the need for Albany to formally evaluate the impact of proposed changes in the general plan and the municipal code, or the zoning ordinance, on the neighborhoods of Keynes and Adams. In particular, the visual and aesthetic impacts on these neighborhoods. The EIR for the current general plan evaluates visual resources and notes that the visual and aesthetic conditions are well regulated in various sections of the general plan and the municipal code. The EIR cites the standards for building heights and building placement, which are intended, quoting from the EIR, to preserve views, maintain light and air, and protect aesthetic quality of the city and the surrounding neighborhoods. The EIR specifically calls out the city's daylight plane regulations. Based on these considerations, the EIR concludes that the general plan policies ensure that, again, quoting the EIR, new development will fit within the scale and design of existing neighborhoods and will not adversely affect the visual character of adjacent areas. Obviously, many of the standards of general plans have now changed. The allowed base building heights have doubled, the setbacks have been reduced, and the daylight plane requirements have been eliminated. The finding in the previous EIR that visual and aesthetic conditions will not be significantly impacted by the general plan will now require additional analysis and evaluation. I will note again that there's been absolutely no technical studies to evaluate the impact of the proposed development standards on the adjacent residential neighborhoods. Initially, we were told that the consultant would be preparing three-dimensional models to test the proposed revisions and the design standards, but this never happened. The city has proposed a simple addendum to the previous EIRs. Addendums are appropriate when there's only minor technical changes or additions that are being proposed. This is not the case here. Specific plan is proposing major changes to the general plan, changes that were not contemplated and therefore not evaluated in the original EIR. These changes will have a direct and significant impact on the neighborhoods of Keynes and Adams. CEQA law requires that when there are substantial changes proposed for a project, subsequent or supplemental EIR shall be required. All right, I'm disappointed that the emails were not distributed very effectively. This is, but those things happen, I guess. All right, thanks.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Next speaker, Brian Martin. Brian, you have 3 minutes starting now.
Thanks. My name is Brian Martin, resident of 600 block of Adams Street. So why does the planning application form for single family homes ask questions about parking? Why does the applicant need to request an exemption from parking requirements, as was the case today in item 4.2, and a great juxtaposition against item 7.1 on the specific plan. In item 4.2, the city showed it is very concerned about the parking issue for owners of single family homes and R1 zoning, even though those neighborhoods, like the neighborhood along San Pablo Avenue, are a short walk from shops and transit. But in item 7.1, the city is showing zero concern for residents in the neighborhood along San Pablo Avenue, even though we're not talking about 1 or 2 additional bedrooms, but thousands of brand new homes the city is planning for in 8 or more story high buildings with 0 parking spaces if the San Pablo Avenue specific plan is adopted as written. One question I have I'd like to hear addressed in the meeting is, what does density bonus law, state density bonus law, do to these 6 to 8 story heights? Does it make them 50% higher by right? So that would be 9 to 12 stories. And so I'd like to hear that clarified. In the housing element, the city is promoting many of these projects along the same street in the same neighborhood, roughly 1,000 new homes with 0 parking spaces required, including one site identified directly behind my house. Meanwhile, this commission recently learned in a public meeting that the neighborhoods along San Pablo Avenue was negatively impacted by federal redlining housing policy, is home to residents with the lowest income in Albany, and has the lowest percentage of white residents. So why does the San Pablo, the document still show only 4 and 5 story renderings along San Pablo Avenue in Albany, when commissioners and the public requested 6 to 8 story renderings in Albany to more realistically show the impact? In fact, at the node of Solano and San Pablo, the rendering is only 5 stories in the northeast corner. It sure looks like an intentional deception to not show the public and the commissioners what they're actually voting on. In the staff report for 7.1, the percent parking occupancy study that was done, it doesn't say if those are unbundled and cost money to park on site. If they do, then it seems like what people are doing is parking on street, and if their parking lots aren't full. Most importantly, the commission should keep in mind that whatever is decided on for San Pablo Avenue and how those decisions impact the surrounding neighborhood sets a bar for the rest of the city. In other words, Solano Avenue will need to have significant height for equity reasons. In particular, Solano Avenue will need to have significant height increases and parking reductions. R1 will need to be rezoned so that residents will have the flexibility to be 2, 3, and 4 plexes by right. 0 parking spaces required for any residential development or remodel in the city. We need new housing. We need new affordable housing. We can do this without 8 to 12-story buildings right up against existing homes. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Yes, next speaker, Christina Osborne. Go ahead.
Thank you. I had to turn off my unmute. I forget how to do that. Thank you for this opportunity. I live on the 800 block of Adams Street, and I will shorten what I was going to say because a lot has already been said, and the letters that people have already written in my neighborhood echo my thoughts. But I want to begin by saying that I'm discouraged and even angered by your proposed plan. It's clear to me from the reading the documents that a great effort has gone into the planning for the buildings on the San Pablo side of the buildings. But there's been almost no consideration made for the residents who live on Adams and Keynes. From what I can find, the only mention of this is in the BD 35 and the BD 36 on the specific plan. I live on the west side of Adams Street, and if a 6-story structure is built across the street from me, there will be a significant impact to me and my neighbors. For one thing, we won't see the sun until after 10:30 in the morning, and our property values will certainly drop. For those who live on the other side of Adams, on the east side, they will have a 6-story building on their backyard fence. The residents on Keynes will be impacted the same way. When this zoning commission previously made their revisions many years ago, I attended all those meetings, and my neighbors attended the meetings, and we stopped the plan, which was to stretch the commercial zone from Adams Street up to Madison and from Keynes to Stanage. We were able to prevent that and stop the impact of commercial on our residential area. In doing that, we went from zone R3 to R2, which lowered our property values because it limited what we could build on our property. I've lived in Albany for over 40 years, and 30 of those years have been on Adams Street. I have been active in the community and have sat on various boards and commissions. Albany is important to me, and I don't want to see it become a city full of high-rise buildings in residential neighborhoods. Adams and Keynes currently have a variety of housing, and it's pleasant. We have duplexes, single-family homes, multi-unit apartment buildings, and it's a lovely community of mixed use. For those of you who do not live near San Pablo, these issues may not seem impactful. I ask you to reconsider the impact your proposal will have on Albany residents, especially in those who lived adjacent to where the proposed changes are. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Next speaker, Valerie Risk. You have 3 minutes starting now.
Hi, my name is Valerie Risk, and I live on the 600 block of Adams Street. The San Pablo Specific Plan should not have 8-story buildings immediately adjacent to single-family homes. Albany is a city that currently has an overwhelming majority of 1- and 2-story buildings. Look around. This includes most of the buildings on San Pablo Avenue and on Solano Avenue. Of course, we need more density. The equitable way to add density would be to remove R1 zoning and encourage 2 to 4 stories throughout the city. You only show 4 to 5-story buildings in your plan drawings for Albany's part of San Pablo Avenue, even though the text says 6 to 8 stories. I imagine that's because they look correct there. Our own block of Adams Street currently has a mix of single-family homes, duplexes, triplexes, and fourplexes. It's a great neighborhood. Neighborhoods having a mix of duplexes, triplexes, and fourplexes with both homeowners and renters living on the same block are pleasant, diverse, interesting neighborhoods. Instead of doing the right thing and densifying all of Albany, the commission is proposing to add 8 to 12-story buildings in one specific section of the city. Not coincidentally, It's the lowest income neighborhood and the neighborhood that was historically affected by redlining. Not coincidentally, it's the neighborhood with more renters and less people involved in local politics. Not coincidentally, it's the neighborhood with fewer wealthy people with time and money to leaflet, organize protests, and sue developers. And perhaps not coincidentally, it's the neighborhood where most of you, members of the committee, do not live. Yes, parking is an issue if we remove R1 zoning in all of Albany. It is somewhat easier to park in a neighborhood where every home is single family and most homes have a garage or some form of other off-street parking. However, today we can still park within a block away from our home on the street. Will we be able to park when 200 new units are built half a block away? When residents near Solano vigorously protested 12 new units, we felt the inequity. Yes, daylight planes are an issue if we increase heights in all of Albany. Some people will lose views if a property is modified to 3 to 4 stories. However, 3 to 4 stories is nothing compared to the 6 to 8 story project that would now be permitted with no review or recourse literally in our backyard. It would completely block our view of the East Bay Hills. Do the right thing for the future of Albany. Don't build 6 to 8 stories on San Pablo. Instead, remove R1 zoning in all of Albany and plan for 2 to 3 stories in most of the city and 3 to 5 stories on San Pablo and Solano. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think we have one final speaker.
Yes. Laura, you can go ahead and, you can go ahead and speak. 3 minutes.
Hi, good evening, commissioners. My name is Laura. I live in the 900 block of Adams Street. I previously lived in Oakland and have returned to Albany, which is a place I love to call home. I seriously hope that you will balance the requirement driven by the state to build more affordable housing with retaining the charm of our community. Let's remember, our tagline is an urban village by the bay. When we drive north and we drive south, we look at the hideous buildings that are going up in Berkeley and in El Cerrito. And it's my concern that if this is approved today and goes on to City Council, that we will decimate the nature of our community, the beauty and charm that is Albany. Thank you for your consideration and have a good evening.
Thank you for your comments. We do have one more speaker.
Yes, Amy, you have 3 minutes to speak. Go ahead.
Hi there. Keynes Avenue piping in. I've lived on Keynes for over 30 years, so I'm on the San Pablo corridor as well. I definitely agree with you guys, with you all, that Albany needs to provide additional housing. To me, minimal parking is appropriate on San Pablo because San Pablo is a major bus route. It's across the street from BART or nearby BART, and Keynes and Adams will soon be bicycle boulevards. Also, businesses of all types, every single type, are easily accessible without a car. I do agree with Brian Martin, who wrote a letter that if multi-unit developments are put in with minimum and no parking, it's really important that you guys further the active transportation improvements that are going on, that you work on getting those in and improving them further. Because if we're gonna minimize motor vehicle use and reduce greenhouse gases, we've got to provide options. Now, I ride my bike all over the Bay Area, and the multi-unit residences on San Pablo in Berkeley, such as the ones near Page, they really fit with the neighborhood, and they fit with 10th Street, and they don't seem overwhelming. And it's Page's, and 10th Street's one block off San Pablo, like Keynes and Adams are. And those are 4 to 5 stories, as are the photos in your renderings. They show 4 to 5 stories, which look right, as many of the other speakers have pointed out. So I think that 4 to 5 stories is reasonable, which is why your pictures show that, and which is which are the types of buildings in Berkeley. And I think that that's more reasonable for the neighborhoods. Thanks.
Thank you. And was there anyone else who wants to speak on this item? I'm seeing no more raised hands. So 3, 2, 1, I will close public comment and bring it back to the commission. Do members of the commission have further comments they would like to make? Go ahead, Commissioner McLeod.
You're on mute,
Commissioner
McLeod.
Yeah, sorry, I just had one more question about the R3 zone. And it's just the contiguous areas along our project area that are being upzoned to 50 feet and not across the city. Is that the intention? Are we creating a separate R3, sort of R3 plus zone in that area, or is it R3 upgrading across the city, or is that going to be a completely separate process if we do that?
That's a great question. And so to clarify, and this is why we have a number of footnotes in the zoning amendments. We are making a change to the R3 within the San Pablo Avenue specific plan area. So we're not changing any other R3s outside of the planning area. And we're not proposing height changes in the R3 unless you are able to consolidate lots and you have a split zoned SPC R3 zoned lot. And as an incentive for that lot consolidation, we're suggesting the building could go up to 50 feet. But otherwise, the R3 height is not changing within the planning area.
Okay, I'll make my other comments later. Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Donaldson. And you are muted as well.
Sorry about that. Okay. Nick, we have like 7 or 8 documents that are, separate documents in front of us tonight. I don't know what's the best way to proceed is, but some of them may require specific comments, and maybe you'd want to take the documents in one at a time and bring them up that way. So we can get commission's comments on them. I don't know. Maybe some way of organizing the process as we work through this would be good. Mm-hmm.
Okay, sure. Let me poll the commissioners then. And first, let me ask you then, Doug, since you've got the floor, Commissioner Donaldson, what are there particular documents you do want to comment on?
Well, I've looked at all of them, and so the land use element chapter. Let's see, that's the general plan, the amendments, the general plan amendments. That was one document. The EIR addendum was another document, and I have comments on that. The design guidelines and objective standards, which is the new document that was incorporated into the draft specific plan. That's a new separate document. The one-page document on community benefits, I have a couple comments there. And then the zoning ordinance amendments are, very detailed with all those footnotes and things like that. So I do have some comments on those. They're kind of detailed, page by page kind of thing. I don't have a lot of comments on them, but some. So I don't know. That's the way that's the way I've thought it through.
Okay.
I don't know.
I'm happy to try to do it that way to see if there's comments on certain documents. Unfortunately, my notes are not as organized as you. I just have general comments, and I'm not sure which documents they actually refer to, but I think that's okay. I don't see that being an issue. So I have all the documents up here in order. So if it's okay with the rest of the commission, I'll go ahead and take Commissioner Donaldson's suggestion. So the first document I see in the packet was just the staff report. And then we have 3 resolutions. So are there any comments on those, on the staff report and resolutions? I'll go ahead.
I think
Go
we
ahead.
should do the resolutions last, right before we vote. You know, they
okay.
they summarize the meat of everything, but I
Sure.
think you reserve the resolutions to the very end, and then we can vote on them one at a time. And probably we have to vote on them in a certain order. I think this.
Yeah, that's an excellent idea. I just wondered if there were any comments, but that's fine. We can. I didn't have any comments on the resolutions. I will make one comment on the staff report, the staff summary, which is that I appreciate the staff including the studies about parking, and to Mr. Martin's comment about perhaps Berkeley. Perhaps Berkeley units are underparked because people are parking in the street. I'll say that from my understanding, Berkeley has quite a few, almost the entire city is covered with the residential parking permits. And so I don't believe that residents of the multi-unit buildings would be allowed to park on the street, would be allowed to purchase residential parking permits. So that is my one comment about the staff report. Commissioner Waddy, did you have a comment about the staff report or anything else?
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in at the beginning to say that I only have comments in general. So I don't want to waste everyone's time by sort of saying I have no comments on each document along the way. So whenever it's the right time to provide like the 10,000 foot commentary, I'm happy to chime in, but no need for me to opine otherwise item by item.
Sure. Yeah. So I'll just try to go through the documents quickly, and I'll just ask if anyone does have a comment to speak up. Otherwise, we'll just go through, and I also have more general comments as well. Okay. So anything else in the staff report or resolutions? Not seeing any hands raised for my fellow commissioners. So the next document, I think, is the land use element of it would be the general plan amendments, correct? Attachment 5?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And Doug, did you have, Commissioner Donaldson, did you have some comments there?
Oh,
Yeah.
yes, I do, for sure.
Okay. Please.
Yeah, I've raised it before. The whole process question about this has really been bothering me. The law that creates specific plans says that the specific plan is purpose of it is to implement part of an area of a general plan. It's not to amend. The purpose of a specific plan is not to amend a general plan, and that's what we're doing here. And so I think the entire process is flawed in that respect, and I think we should have started out with a general plan revision program that would have noticed everybody in the city, and that we would have concentrated on San Pablo Avenue to do that, and we may have come up with the same results. I'm not sure. But anyway, I really believe the process is flawed. The staff report or the document says that the specific plan makes minor amendments to the general plan, and I really disagree with that. Along the line, we've had comments from Brian Martin, Clay Larson. The specific plan radically changes the land use designations on the San Pablo corridor. And I think it violates some of the strategies that we had in the 2016 general plan regarding sensitive transitions for the development on the east and west side. I think it does not encourage designs. It discourages designs that will protect privacy and sunlight for adjoining neighborhoods, like we've heard from people who are residents of Keynes and Adams, and it dramatically increases height limits. This is a radical modification of Albany's general plan. It compromises policy 1.2, which hardly even discussed, calling for balanced growth. What this does is unbalanced growth. Our general plan called for more commercial development and some offices along the San Pablo corridor. And what we're doing here is we're changing the balance of our future development away from commercial and offices, including offices, to massive residential, to mid-rise residential. and it just doesn't violate policy 1.2. Policies 2.2 and 3.8 talk about contrast between height and adjacent development, sunlight, decreasing buffering. It makes all of those issues worse. And when we did the general plan in 2016, it was recognized that those were sensitive issues, and they became some of the most contentious and difficult policies to work through in 2016, led to the creation of the setbacks, discussion about setbacks and of the daylight plane regulations that were developed and put in the general plan. The specific plan directly violates policy LU 3.1, the land use policy, in which the general plan says that with density bonuses, the maximum FAR on San Pablo Avenue would be 3. And here we're proposing an FAR as high as 4.5 by right. So anyway, I think I've made those comments before. Generally, nothing's changed, and the specific plan is not a minor adjustment to the general plan. This is to me, it's a radical change of Albany's plans for the San Pablo corridor. So those are my comments on the land use element. Thank you.
Okay, any other commissioner want to comment on the land use element of the general plan? Not seeing any hands. I'll just say that I agree that we should have seen modifications to this earlier in the process. That said, commissioners and the public have been notified at numerous hearings that the general plan would be amended as part of this process. So that's all I'll say about that.
Sure.
All right, and then the next document I have is attachment 6, which is the addendum to the general plan EIR. Did you have comments about that, Commissioner Donaldson?
I do for sure. Let's see, a few here. Population and housing section of the addendum. I don't have the page reference here exactly, but it comments that the project would not induce substantial unexpected population growth. Well, first of all, the CEQA standard is not unexpected population growth. The CEQA standard is substantial population growth. And so, I think that throwing in that one word is kind of changes the emphasis in an inappropriate way. But my comment is really that the opposite is true, in that it would create substantial population growth in Albany if it ever builds out. And in fact, I'd even say the purpose of this specific plan is to greatly increase the population of Albany by adding more housing units. The addendum to the EIR says there would be 1,580 residents, more than the general plan build out that was projected. I calculate that, or I think I calculated that, but that would be a population increase of over 3,558 people, which is a 17.5% increase in Albany's population over the 2020 census population. So I think that this is a substantial, this is the biggest project, biggest population growth project that Albany's had or proposed or planned for in the past 3 general plans that I'm aware of, and I am aware of going back that far. This is a big deal. And I really think that it's too big in the sense that if you add in the specific plan projections plus the Albany, we would add 1,460 units along the San Pablo corridor, well above our RENA requirement. The RENA requirement is a real thing. We have to try to do our best to deal with it on a citywide basis. and accommodate space for 1,114 new units over the 30-year period. I think it's 30 years. But this one project here, the specific plan, will exceed our arena. It proposes more units than we have in our arena. So I just want to make the comment. It is a growth-inducing project. It will definitely, and the purpose of it is to increase the population of Albany. Okay, and then there's parking. When the general plan was adopted, we required 2 spaces per unit. That's in the general plan. Subsequently, we've reduced that to 1 space per unit for multifamily housing. The specific plan would eliminate these parking requirements for all housing. But even in the addendum, there's reference to 2 projects that show that you don't have to have 1 space per unit. But I'll note that those projects respectively have a demand of a half a space per unit on one of them and 7/10 of a space parking demand for the other one. And that's well above zero, well above no parking requirement. No parking studies were done as part of the preparation of the specific plan. UC Village is a fabulous example right in town of how to deal with parking. And I only know it anecdotally and only from talking to people who live there. But I do know that UC Village provides 1 space per housing unit. And it is bundled. It is included in your rent. And from talking to residents, everybody has a parking space who has a car. Some people without cars rent out their parking spaces because some families have 2 cars. And there are a small number of visitor parking spaces that are always in high demand. I think that the parking at UC Village is pretty well balanced, probably appropriate. And it should be viewed as an example for Albany and for Albany's future. And it just highlights the problem to me and the anxiety I have about trying to drop down to 0 parking. It just isn't going to work. And the impacts that the neighbors fear are going, I think, will occur. They're real. So, okay. Utilities and infrastructure is mentioned, is discussed in the addendum in the EIR. We had the Public Works and Infrastructure project that we reviewed some months ago. I don't have any problem with what's there. I have a problem with what's not there. And I've commented on it before and to no avail. The addendum, the infrastructure and utility project does not look at cellular communications. There are 3 cell towers on the San Pablo corridor that I know of. I think that's it. We have no information at all about how those would be affected if a developer wants to put a building on San Pablo, either on the parcels where those cell towers are located or adjacent to where those cell towers are located. I suspect that it is not easy to relocate cell towers. And I think that the addendum and the public works and infrastructure analysis should have looked at that. It should have been added to the scope of work. This is a potentially significant issue, one that is now, I don't know how it'll ever be resolved. Some developer is going to come along and find out, ooh, this is going to be hard, and it will be hard. Some of those cell towers are owned by one company, some are not. You deal with multiple providers, and cell phone service is instrumental to our society right now, and it should be included in the utilities and infrastructure evaluation. So that's it on the addendum. I don't think it's adequate. Thank you.
Thank you. And any other commissioner wish to speak to that document? I'll briefly speak to the comments made, which is that I'll again point to the staff summary, which cites a study from San Francisco, which talks about induced demand for parking. And there are studies elsewhere as well that I know of where induced demand, if you build spaces and make it unbundled, people will decide, oh, okay, well, that removes a lot of barriers for me to have a vehicle. And I think it's a poor use of land for a motor vehicle, and it goes against our climate action goals to induce demand for motor vehicles. And I think but we don't, we're not saying developers cannot build one space per. They can. So leave it up to the market and the developers of the housing whether or not they feel that they need zero parking or one space per or something in between. And that's all I'll say. And I see that Commissioner McLeod has his hand up. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, just a couple of brief comments. The RENA requirements and the housing element are an 8-year timeline, and our specific plan is basically a 20-year timeline. So it's not exactly the same unit numbers that would apply. It's a much longer build out for the San Pablo specific plan, and I don't expect that it's going, and absolutely it will not happen all at once. It's going to happen over many, many years. So this is really a guideline for the future. And it is part of our RENA plan, but it is not the total response for our RENA plan. So just to keep that in mind, and that we will be looking at upzoning all around the city as part of the housing element. So, in that sense, the people that have commented about equity and sharing the burden or sharing the growth around the city, I think that will be addressed as we go forward as part of the housing element. And as far as parking is concerned, no parking minimums does not mean zero parking will happen. There will always be parking. The developers will provide some parking dependent on their view of how much they think is warranted per project, per their market studies, market conditions. And it will be somewhere between probably 0.5 and 0.75 or something that on average, I would imagine. And I would also note that the city of San Jose just adopted a zero parking minimum standard across their entire city. So, there are very good other examples of municipalities that have done this. And the ones that have done it, the sky has not fallen. It has not been a disaster citywide. So I think, I think we should be comfortable going forward with the zero parking minimum. That's it for now. Make other comments later. Thank you.
Thank you. I concur with Commissioner McLeod's comments, and I'll note that Berkeley next door has removed all parking requirements for all the residential. And his comment that this is the beginning. This was a specific plan, but we have the housing element, which is our plan into which we can put our plans for all the rest of Albany, and the people from the public have made some great comments about what we should do for equity, and I also want to see R2 and R3 zoning addressed, as well as R1 zoning. And I love it that members of the public said that mixtures in neighborhoods of single-family zoning and duplexes and triplexes and fourplexes are a great thing, and I agree. So moving on to the next document, unless there's a final comment on that one, would be the San Pablo Avenue Specific Plan Design Guidelines and Objective Standards. And this is where I have the least, I would say, maybe expertise. So I'm hoping that if there's any changes we need to make there or any comments we need to make, my fellow design professionals or architects on the commission might make them now. Is there anyone who wants to speak to this document? No. Well, maybe just the one comment by Commissioner Moment about the coverage, and that might do it. Okay. Going once, going twice. Great, thank you. And then we have a short document of the community benefits portion of the specific plan. Any comments on that one? Go ahead, Commissioner Donaldson.
Yes, I'll make a comment on that. I probably have a couple comments, but on list B, which is in the community benefits, under community benefits, list B, there's item B is family-friendly housing, at least 20% of the units designed for 3 bedrooms. That would be a community benefit that a developer could choose from this list. I would like to amend that item, that choice, to add that it should have 1 parking space at least. And I think that's reasonable. I don't think you should have a 3-bedroom family unit without a car, without availability, without having a car. Families with children use cars, need cars, and I think we should do that. I also think this is a real good benefit, and I would probably put it in list A, and move it to list A. So, and then on list B, item A, I think that Jean said that on-site public art, that someone, I think the city council said that it added the idea that it may not be satisfied with an in lieu fee. I don't even see the reason why we have this listed as a community benefit. I would go with stay with our art in public spaces ordinance, and let the applicants and the future applicants decide whether they want to do art on site or whether they want to contribute to an in lieu fee. I think the Arts Committee should be able to decide how to spend that money on public art, not necessarily on site. So I was confused by that. I don't remember that we put that in there, and Jean, maybe the city council did, and maybe they had good reasons for doing so. But I don't know what other commissioners think about that. So in summary, I'd like to change the family-friendly housing to include a parking space. I think it's only reasonable. And then possibly put it in list A, which I think kind of gives it a higher priority. And then I'd like to know about the on-site public art condition. Thank you.
Thanks. So yeah, I think that does bear clarification, because my understanding is that that is already a requirement that their projects provide public art or an in lieu fee. So could staff clarify list B, item A?
Yes, so the feedback we got was to only have community benefits that were not already requirements. And right now, the developer has the option. They can pay the fee or they can put the art on site. The suggestion here to have the art on site is really about placemaking around helping establish identity. You know, we don't want cookie cutter buildings. And so part of it's just, you know, we've been thinking about relationship to Ohlone history, you know, how can we help build identity here? So that was the thinking. But yes, you're correct that the art and public places ordinance currently does apply.
I see. So the item is about if you do provide it on site with that and not the in lieu fee, then that is an amenity, or that's a public that's a community benefit you're providing.
Right. If you want to take advantage of this as a benefit, you have to put it on site. If you're required to provide it, you cannot. You would not be able to pay the fee in lieu.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Understood. All right. So and then well, we have a couple more hands raised, and I wanted to Commissioner Donaldson had made a couple of suggestions, so I wanted to get the pulse of the Commission about that, but perhaps Commissioner McLeod and Momin are going to speak to that. So go ahead, Commissioner McLeod.
Yeah, just a couple of things. On list A, I'm a little ambivalent about the arts one, being as it is already required, and I guess I understand the idea of encouraging on-site art. I think, you know, mostly a good idea, but it is already a requirement. So I don't know, that they can get a benefit for just complying with an existing requirement does seem a little odd to me. So I would probably not include that. The other one I have some problem with is item C, list A, item C. I mean, most of the things that are listed, bus shelter, bike facility, crosswalk improvement, are really, really difficult on San Pablo Avenue and are going to be part of a much bigger process involving multiple agencies, multiple entities. So I don't see how one site can actually really do anything there, and it's subject to such crazy approvals from Caltrans, et cetera, that, I would find it mostly not even feasible. Maybe some of the side streets, it could work a little bit, but that's sort of a long shot for me. So I don't really understand, practically speaking, how that would work. So I wouldn't really be in favor of having it. All these things are a little problematic in some sense, one way or the other. On list B, the all-electric item C, I think we're in the process of drafting an all-electric ordinance at the moment. State of California may require that very soon. But I guess we can amend this list as we go forward without a lot of, without a big effort. So, maybe once that is done, once we have an ordinance in place, we could drop that one. So I had a problem with that. And then I just wanted to clarify also with item E that we already require a minimum of a 14-foot minimum ceiling height. So I don't quite see what we're getting there. And also, do we have a minimum depth established elsewhere for commercial space? It would be much less than 50 feet, I'm imagining. What is the minimum depth in the specific plan?
I don't think we have a minimum depth indicated, only the minimum ground floor height. So this was in an effort to get a more leasable retail space.
Just a deeper storefront commercial space. Okay, well, maybe going forward, we can sort of see how that works and modify it in the future. Okay, well, that's it for the moment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Moman.
I actually have a question about item B on list A, the mid-block pedestrian connection. Would that be, I remember reading some reference to allowing mid-block pedestrian connection to be counted towards publicly accessible open space. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right. And I think I can find the page number, but I think we've clarified that in the design guidelines document.
So in that case, then should these two items be on the same list? Like item A is publicly accessible open space, and then item B is mid-block pedestrian connection. So if some property, some project provides a mid-block pedestrian connection, they would automatically fulfill item A, and so the city would just get one community benefit and not two under the list A.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, we can either clarify that you'd really have to do both. That seems unlikely. Or
can that be moved to list B? And I had mentioned in the last meeting, suggested that item B in list B, family-friendly housing, could actually move to the list A.
Okay.
So I apologize. I don't think I caught the intention. So we were talking about first list A, item B, the mid-block connection. Can you state your point there again, please?
So it looks like somewhere on the document, it specifies that the mid-block connection area could be counted towards the publicly accessible open space, which is part of the item A on list A. So if some project provides a mid-block connection, then they automatically also complies with item A. And so the city would get just one community benefit and not two.
I see. Okay. All right. So your suggestion is we might want to move one of them to the other list.
Yeah, I'm wondering, like, would that be, first of all, what is the probability of that? Like, how many properties have, we have this map of mid-block connections, and then like how many of those would provide a publicly accessible open space. So I would, recommend the planning team to look more deeply into that and see the implications of that and then decide.
And I think right now, the way we have it structured, you're only required to provide one amenity from list A. So I guess it is an either or. We wouldn't see both.
I see. Okay.
But I hear you. It's a little bit awkward that something could qualify for both with the same improvement.
Yeah. If it is one, then yeah, that would not have big impact. Yeah.
Okay.
And then sorry, go ahead, Commissioner, please.
Oh, I was just going to ask you to clarify this. The second one, I think, was your second point was about the family-friendly housing.
Yeah, I thought these 3-bedroom units are expensive units because typically 3-bedroom units come with larger area and also maybe two bathrooms, and so in order to incentivize more 3-bedroom units, it needs to be like a bigger community benefit. And so what I understand from this list is that list A is kind of big ticket community benefits, and list B is secondary. And so I don't think family-friendly housing is a small, item. If we want the developer to develop 20% of the units to be 3-bedroom units, it's a big chunk of real estate.
Okay. Well, I wanted to come back to some of these suggestions to see if there's consensus among the commission. So let's start with this last one here. Does the commission feel we should move list B, item B, up to list A? I think it sounds
Can I ask Jean to maybe put this on shared screen so that we're all looking at the same thing and know what we're planning on, if that's doable?
If there's a way to hit the plus to make it the text a little bigger, that would be great. Thank you. So I'm not hearing any other comments that we should move list B, item B to list A.
I'm in favor of that, and I'm
you're in favor. Okay.
This is Doug, and I'm in favor of requiring one parking space for the family units and moving.
I understood. I want to get to that one, but
okay.
Let's start with.
So I'm in favor of family-friendly housing going up to list A. Yeah.
Okay. So there's 3 of us who think that that's a good idea, and just any dissension.
Well, I mean, are we comfortable with the 20% number? Or should it be higher?
Yeah.
Often the the unit mix design, it just sort of lends itself to some 3-bedroom units. I don't know. Or just the layout. Sometimes it makes sense to do 3-bedroom units.
It might be hard for us to figure out what's the correct number. But Commissioner Waddy, you have your hand up.
Sure. I mean, I can go either way on this, although I do think it's worth pointing out, somebody only has to choose one option in list A. So moving it from B to A really just dilutes its effectiveness effectively. You could just pick it by itself and that would be it. Whereas if it's in B, you have to pick it plus another thing. So to me, it is, to me, it looks to how I'm looking at this is what is the cost? And, it is a fairly high cost to, you're decreasing the number of doors effectively you can have. The more 3-bedroom units you have, probably the fewer doors that you're going to have. So it's going to decrease your overall profit. I'm fine moving it up to item A. I will just say, and I know I haven't chimed in yet, and I was going to do it later. My approach for tonight, I am generally supportive of this plan as proposed, and I've got some other comments to do. So I was not planning on getting into the weeds and nitpicking on individual items and making a bunch of amendments. My feeling is we've had a ton of hearings. We've kind of each won some and lost some that we care about. And to me, I'm definitely pulling up and looking at this as sort of an on balance analysis and not going to be focusing on individual sort of this granular of comments, but I'm happy to opine on this one, but just so everyone knows, that's not the approach that I'm taking in terms of my vote tonight.
Well, Commissioner Waddy, I appreciate that. And I think actually that might be a good approach for the commission to take, because we have seen this at least a couple of times and commented. So, and it is meant to be something that can be amended at any time. So unless perhaps another way we could go is just unless we all feel very strongly about some change, and I'm not hearing consensus, and I'm not hearing a majority. I'm not hearing that all of us are concerned about any one thing or another. Perhaps we ought to just leave it alone for now. Would that be okay with the commissioners if we just left it to future meetings or to the council?
I mean, and if I can suggest, it might also be worthwhile for us to sort of finish out all of our commentary, start on the voting, and if we don't have, a majority vote on one way or the other, then maybe we can start seeing if amendments need to be made in order to get us there. But that would sort of be my suggestion.
Okay, but just going back to this particular document, let me just review my notes about where people made comments, why don't I just see if there's anyone who wants to second, anyone who feels strongly they want to second a comment about someone else's comment, or can we just move on with the document as is? Let's see, there's a bunch of hands up, so I don't know. Commissioner Moment, did you still want to? Okay, Commissioner McLeod.
Well, I would agree with Commissioner Waddy. We have looked at this many times. List A is kind of the big urban design bang for your buck kind of thing. The others are very more site specific to the project. So I'm in a way comfortable leaving it as is and looking at it in the future. It is something that we can amend without a lot of process or back and forth, I think, and without much controversy of any kind. So yeah, I would be in favor of just moving forward.
Okay, unless I hear a strong objection, let's just go ahead and move on. And staff, I think, has noted all the comments, and so we can get back to this later, or people can also feel free to bring these things up at the council when the council takes this up as well. Okay, thank you. Oh, Commissioner Moment, go ahead.
Just a small observation. There is a typo on item A, list A. It says 1,500 square feet of 10% of the lot area. I think it should be 1,500 square feet or 10% of the lot area.
Thank you. Okay, great. I see nodding heads. Thank you for that. And thank you, Commissioner Wadi, for helping move us along. All right, so moving on to the next document, I have I guess it's the zoning, oops, my document session expired. I think it's the zoning amendment.
Yep.
Yeah, were you going to speak to this, Commissioner Donaldson?
Yeah, yes, I do. I understand where the commission is going here. And, zoning amendment issues can be language full of details and things. Let me find mine here. I do have some comments. Where did it go? And maybe a couple of them are important here. On page 8, footnote 15, this is one of the big footnotes. It's important. It affects a great deal, so I would like to express my comment on it. Footnote 15, so what did I say, page 8? Yeah. Mm-hmm. A clarification on this. Let's see. Okay, it says use permitted on the ground floor only on sites identified as opportunity sites in the housing element. I would like clarification on that, because I'm interested in knowing what uses are permitted on non-housing opportunity sites. And what do I mean by that? I mean, if we're looking at a housing opportunity site and footnote 15 applies to a number of types of uses. And the footnote says...
Sorry, Commissioner Donaldson, can I just interrupt you? My footnotes aren't numbered, so, and don't think I see the one you're referencing on page 8.
Page 8
so
in red line. It's a new footnote.
Red line footnote. Oh,
there you go. Mm-hmm. That's it. Right there.
Okay, thank you.
That's the footnote, and then you need to go back to the zoning table, and footnote 15 under SPC affects many uses. And so the uses are permitted on the ground floor only on sites identified as opportunity sites in the housing element. Does that mean that if you're not at a housing opportunity site, you can't have, say, animal grooming, because that has footnote 15 by it, or you can't have animal sales? I'm worried about that. I don't understand adequately how this is going to work, and I don't know. Maybe I'm not thinking straight here, but I think staff should take a real look at that. And we may need, I don't know what to do. May need to have it, break it up in 2 footnotes. One for housing opportunity sites and another one for other sites. So I don't know. Maybe staff understands my comment.
Yes.
I hope you do.
Okay. And I'm happy to respond. And this is what I was referring to, where the proposal has a lot of footnotes that seem a little bit wacky, but we tried to maintain the city's existing structure. So as you said, footnote 15 says that the use that's referenced in footnote 15 is only permitted on the ground floor. And that means it's added to, as you indicated, a bunch of different commercial use types. We see footnote 15 added all over the place. And that's because the way it is now, somebody could come in and have an office or a laboratory on all floors.
Right.
So the entire building could be 100% commercial with no residential requirement. The reason for limiting those uses to the ground floor, so your animal hospital could be on the ground floor on housing opportunity sites, is that our understanding from HCD is that they will not allow us to assume sufficient capacity for residential on that housing opportunity site if it's allowed to be 100% commercial. And so what this is intending to say, and we'll certainly look at the language because it sounds like it's not clear, is that on those housing opportunity sites, the commercial use is limited to the ground floor and you could not have those upper stories commercial.
Okay, that's good. Okay, I understand that, and I appreciate that. I agree with that. Can you take a look at the language and see if we can work out something that? So the footnote 15 applies only to sites identified as housing opportunity sites. Is that right?
Well, yes and no. So the first part of it does. And then the second part says if you're redeveloping this site and it already had, and it's a large lot, we're trying to retain as much commercial as we can. Because we, as you may recall, we discussed with a retail broker how many times mixed use, when it gets redeveloped on the ground floor, you end up with these very small 1,500 square foot, 2,000 square foot commercial sites. And so the idea behind the second component is that when we have a big site, a 20,000 square foot site, we want to retain a larger footprint commercial use that could take a different kind of store and not just a little cafe. Right. And so this is emphasizing larger redevelopment site, you're required to put a larger commercial use with that minimum 50-foot good leasable retail space stuff.
Right.
So you're right. It's two different ideas happening in one footnote, but applying to the same set of uses footnoted above.
Well, I don't know what to say. Can you look at that? And
yes,
I think I've made my comment.
Yeah.
Okay. Number B, my note, that's not right. My next comment is on page 6, starting on page 6, we have all these uses. Now, a few of them, like personal services, tutoring and lessons, are things that are land uses that you can do with a home occupation permit. And I think that footnote 15 would eliminate that opportunity, that issue. It would mean that you couldn't do tutoring in your apartment in a multifamily home in the San Pablo Specific Plan area if footnote 15 were in place. So I think we should not inadvertently eliminate the idea of home occupation permits in Albany's new multifamily dwellings that are in the specific plan area. And I don't see that addressed. I don't know quite how to address that. There must be a portion of the zoning ordinance that talks about home occupations, and it might need to be addressed there. But I think as I see it, footnote 15 would mean that you couldn't do some home occupations in new multifamily dwellings in the specific plan area. So that's a concern for me. Okay. On page 20, I had something on page 9. I'll forget that. Page 20. Let's see. Let's see. Okay, now how does my thought here? Let's see. Oh yeah, on page 20, and it would be dealing with a commercial node overlay district, and it's paragraph 3, design standards. I think it needs to be modified here because the only nodes that we have in Albany are all within the specific plan area. And the way you've redlined this and made the proposed revisions is within a commercial node overlay district, except within the specific San Pablo Specific Planning area, the following design standards shall apply. You know, I stand corrected. I think no, that's not a no. Is there a node on Marin Avenue between Evelyn and Talbot? Is that a special node? Or is that is that a little overlay? I don't remember. Anyway, could you check on that and see if that needs to be edited?
And we can look and make sure, but the idea was to preserve this district as a district that could be used elsewhere in the city, on Solano and another location. So we could delete the whole thing, but the idea was to retain it for any kind of future designation.
All right. I guess I understand that thought. It will be confusing. Okay, it's confusing if there are no other nodes in the city. Okay, all right. Page 43. No, I think I've already made this comment in multiple ways. It just chagrins me to see this minimum parking standard of 0. And that's on page 43. And I'll also comment that unbundled parking is a bad idea and will only crowd our streets with cars near these projects. So okay, those are my comments on the zoning ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you. I did have one thing just to point out, which is that the zoning amendments do speak of the provision or the requirement that developers provide a Clipper card or an AC Transit Easy Pass with certain developments, and that is also meant to help with to help reduce the need for motor vehicles. So although one thing I'd just like to ask the consultants, have you seen this done in other developments or other plans in other cities?
Yes, so the city of Berkeley requires it for, I think, most developments now. And so the developer purchases in bulk passes, and it's up to the unit occupant to request it. Sometimes they'll require that it be posted in a public location that these are available, because otherwise the information might not be out there. So that's something that we could clarify. But yes, so the city of Berkeley does it for most multifamily.
Okay, that makes me feel better, because I was a little bit worried that this is a unique program that we were introducing that might be problematic for the developer. I mean, I support it, but I wouldn't want it to break a project. And Commissioner Moman, you have a comment?
Yeah, I have a related comment, and I had mentioned that in our last meeting also. Since you mentioned Berkeley is using that strategy, what is the value they have decided for the Clipper card? Is it in terms of number of rides, or in terms of a dollar value? Because if it is really a small value, I don't think that would be really helpful in terms of reducing the dependency on a car.
I'll have to look into it more, but the AC Transit Easy Pass that's referenced, we have contacted AC Transit about this, and that is a sort of bulk pass that they provide for this kind of situation where an employer or a apartment building is offering these. And so I'd have to find out a little bit more information. I thought it was maybe a monthly kind of pass from AC Transit. but I don't have an answer right now. I'd have
Yeah,
to look
it
into that.
depends, like, where you commute to. If you
Right.
commute to San Francisco, it charges like $12 a day. And so if you are, doing like, if you want to know what is the monthly cost, it would be like more than $200. And if you are commuting somewhere closer, that would be much less. So, it depends. It should be clear what would be the value, I think, for everyone, not just for the residents, tenants, but also for the developer.
And maybe we just want to find out what the kind of the best practice for doing that is, and perhaps codify it there. Okay. Any other comments about the zoning changes? Otherwise, I think that's the last substantive document, unless there's any errors on the zoning map or the specific plan map, or anything, any comments people need to make on that. Next, after that, I believe is simply the all the public comment. Double checking that. Yeah. So I think this would be the time then for general comment. So Commissioner Moman, go ahead.
No, actually, I had an observation about general plan
map.
I think we decided to add Goodwill store site to the northern node. And I think this general plan map doesn't include that, and the notes, markup notes that are added there also doesn't include that. So it would be included.
Okay, attachment 10, I'm sorry, could you, just the staff know the parcel being described? I missed it. Could you say it one more time?
It's a Goodwill store, which is, what is the street?
Oh, that's right.
South of Brighton and east of San Pablo Avenue. It was not part of the northern node previously. And I think in this new updated document, the planning staff and design team included that in the northern node. So that is shown in the zoning map amendment, but not in the general plan map. So it's a minor correction.
Oh, okay. Did the staff catch that? Need any clarification? Okay, you got that. All right.
Not on the map, that map. It is in the general plan amendments, highlighted amendments on page 11. Yep.
This one. Okay. Yep. We have not made the map changes to the specific map, so they're just listed here.
It is not listed there also, I think. Or is it? Okay,
so yeah, there's just a description that says it will be revised.
Right. Okay. So we will ultimately need to amend this map, but right now we just have this general description that would be expanding the major activity node at Solano and Brighton. But I understand your point that it goes down to Clay. It really should say Clay, I think. Okay. Thank you.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Thanks for the correction. And Commissioner Moman, as long as you've got the floor, do you want to go ahead and say any general comments you have?
No, I don't have any general comments. I would just once again like to thank planning staff and the design team for the great work that they have done so far. I appreciate all their efforts and congratulate them on completing this, successfully completing this exercise.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner. And Commissioner Wadi.
Thank you. And again, just to echo my thanks to staff and consultants for a great product that's before us. And more than anything, really a great structure for this process. I feel like, this has been a tremendous amount of information that we've all had to process. with a lot of minutia, a lot of nitty gritty details. And I really appreciate that you guys structured it in such a way that kind of broke things off for us in really digestible parts. And I actually really like the straw polls that you guys did. I had never really done that in any type of public process before, but I thought it was a really good way for us to see where the final votes landed on various issues and how you pulled it all together. So big kudos to all of you. This is an immense amount of work. Again, as I mentioned before, just sort of, I'm pulling back a little bit, 10,000 feet here. One quick thing I did want to note, just because I know it did come up a little bit, I just want to comment that, like, from my professional experience, the approach that we're taking here, where we're doing the general plan amendments sort of at the same time as the specific plan amendments and the zoning change amendments, all of that being processed concurrently in sort of a certain order of operations for our actions, but in one fell swoop, is very common. In fact, all of the area plans that I've ever been part of or my agencies have been a part of have always happened in that manner. So this is not strange to me, and I don't think it is sort of unlawful or disingenuous for us to be taking that approach. I think it's something that many jurisdictions do. I understand the sort of critiques to the contrary, but this is not an atypical process that we're undertaking in Albany. So I think it's important for us to put that out there. So anyhow, I have no issues with the approach that we've been taking moving forward in that manner tonight. I also want to state that I know there are a lot of folks who are really talking about this in contrast to sort of 2016 plan. And I do think it's important for us to just note, even though it doesn't seem like that long ago, we are really in a different moment as a community and what is being expected of us from a state. But I think we've had a bit of hopefully a societal reckoning over the last several years. And I think that's really a bit of the question that's before us, is that we need to think about things differently. We need to do things differently. And I think we need to question kind of the things that we held as sort of inherent truths and question those a little bit differently than we have in the past, and to really have ask those tough questions about the role that land use has played in a lot of the inequities that our larger society sees. And, we may not see it on a project by project basis and be able to draw those connections, but I think to really pull back and see how all of these things have really led to outcomes that I don't think any of us think are ideal outcomes in our society at large. Certainly Albany is not responsible for all of those things, but I think we do need to sort of play our part here. And I think as it relates to this San Pablo area plan, what's really important to me is really looking at the San Pablo plan that we have on the books. In my opinion, it hasn't worked. It hasn't generated projects. I mean, obviously we have the San Pablo, the Albany Bowl project, but in reality, I think that's more of a product of state density bonus law and the recent court cases that really opened up the usage of state density bonus law for developers than it is a product of the success of our current San Pablo plan. So I think it's important for us to just get to the fact that although there was a lot of effort and I think good intention done on that previous plan, it hasn't worked. So we need to do something different. The population is growing. We have a responsibility to accommodate for our fair share. If we don't, we'll lose state funding. We'll lose our discretion on future housing projects. And again, this is also still just a policy document. Even if this is the best policy document on the face of the earth, it does not guarantee that housing production will come. But I do think this is, in general, a great step that we can take as a policy body in making the conditions and the rules and the laws more apt for the housing development that we. I personally don't think that there are any substantive changes being presented tonight. I mean, I know we've talked a lot in the weeds on various issues, but in general, I think these are all topics we've talked over in the past. And I am very much comfortable moving this forward tonight. Again, the perspective that I'm looking on all of this as a package is an on-balance perspective. There are definitely things in here that I'm not 100% on board on. And I think every commissioner has probably opined on various things that they're not okay with. But I also don't want to let sort of perfection be the enemy of the good here. I think this is on balance a really good plan. I also want to remind us that things don't become, cast in stone as soon as we adopt this. If we adopt this and we start seeing really unintended consequences happening, we can legislate those. We can fix those. We can bring those forward. And I think that's an important thing to remember, that this isn't the end of the work that we do as a policy body. And I think we should be reflective and take stock of what's happening and hear from staff of, we've had applicants come in and this was an unintended, I think with Commissioner Donaldson bringing up the sort of the tutoring. I don't think anyone would want us to be preventing people to be able to tutor in their homes. And I think if we see these being problematic, we should take stock of it. And I feel like staff has traditionally brought forward pieces of legislation where they've noticed little quirks that don't quite work in the zoning code. And I would encourage staff and consultants to continue to do that if they see things that are clearly not in alignment with the conversations that we've been having around this. So anyhow, that is my soapbox that I will get off of now, but all in all, sort of that is my perspective on this. I think on balance, this is a good plan. I think this is a good change. I am very comfortable giving this a go and seeing if this leads to better outcomes. Because again, what we're working off of before didn't work. And I really think we need to make this pivot and move forward. So I am more than happy to, we'll see where all the other conversation goes, but I'm more than happy to make a motion to approve the package of documents forward tonight to the City Council.
Thank you, Commissioner Waddy, for those comments. Who would like to go next for general comments, if any? Commissioner McLeod.
I agree. I agree 100% with Commissioner Waddy's comments. There are some things I would like to see a little bit different or better or improved in my point of view, from my point of view. But as a package, I'm quite comfortable moving forward on all the items tonight. I think it is useful to have the big picture again. More housing is not just better for an equity point of view, for getting more people from diverse backgrounds to live here, but it's also better from an environmental point of view. Reduces pressure on building further out and putting more pressure on our agricultural lands and more pressure on our highways. It gives people better access to jobs within the Bay Area. It brings more people to our city, which is great. I think it's more customers for local businesses. It just is more kids for even for our school district, who is actually advertising out of our city to have more kids come here from out of district. We have the capacity here. So, I think it's fine. I think it's great. I think it hopefully brings a great new mix of businesses on San Pablo Avenue. And I think it's important that we provide alternatives to car usage and do what we can to reduce car usage. The Transportation Demand Management Program is one of those. Reducing car parking helps. In the future, supporting better bus service, more robust bus service on San Pablo, et cetera, better bike facilities all throughout the city, and better bike rooms as part of the solution. So, for a lot of good reasons, this is a good plan for Albany, and I support it 100%. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner McLeod. And
Pardon? Oh, you calling me? No. Okay.
Yeah, sorry, there's some background. Go ahead.
I think this plan takes several risks that we shouldn't be taking that could have significant consequences, and that are consequences that are worrisome for me. With the state density bonus law as it exists, we got the Albany Bowl project. It's a big project. It's the kind of development that this plan anticipates along San Pablo Avenue, and we got it without this plan. The state density bonus law, we've learned at 1600 Solano recently, pretty much allows developers to do just about anything they want to. By adopting this plan, we're raising the base envelope for development along San Pablo Avenue to a new height level, far higher than has ever been anticipated when we did the general plan. And when you add density bonuses to that, I worry that we're going to get some undesirable and bad projects. Similarly, with the traffic standards, the parking standards, I think it's a mistake to go down to zero parking, and I've talked about that plenty in the past. I think the state density bonus law is the elephant in the room. It's the way it's evolving. We saw on 1600 Ordway or 1600 Solano is that it is going to allow pretty much allows developers to do whatever they want. Added on the base of this plan, I'm just worried about it. It makes me anxious about it. And So I'm going to vote no. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll wrap up my comments. I agree with the comments of Commissioner Waddy and Commissioner McLeod on this one. I don't need to say more. I will speak to the 6 to 8 stories, though. So I think one thing that's being forgotten in this discussion is that one of the reasons that we want to have our height limits higher is so that developers won't invoke state density bonus and be able to override our requirements. So in the case of 6 stories or 8 stories, they'd have to go higher than that in order to invoke the state density bonus, and I just don't think that's going to happen. So if they don't invoke it, then they don't get to waive. They don't get all these waivers that we've seen in other projects. So I think it's a good thing, and I don't think, and it doesn't mean that everywhere that it's zoned for 6 stories will have 6-story buildings, or everywhere it's zoned for 8 stories will have 8-story buildings. It doesn't mean that at all. Developers will propose what they will propose. I think this is a great plan. I have been looking forward to seeing this plan through for quite some time. I spoke about it. I was on the Planning and Zoning Commission with Commissioner Donaldson way back when El Cerrito did their first San Pablo Avenue specific plan, and I remembered it. And I thought about it, and then I started talking about it at council and commission meetings that, hey, we ought to do this too, because El Cerrito has generated a ton of housing out of their plan, and then they had to expand it in order to be able to build even more housing that was demanded, that they need to build, that they want to build. So I'm so happy to see this finally coming through, and I thank the staff for going out to get the funding for this and for all their hours and seeing this through, and all the many hearings. And I'm so gratified that this is finally almost done, and it's part of our bigger story, and so gratified to be able to be a part of this and the housing element as well, which will be our bigger story about how we evolve the city and keep the city vital. I will just say one more thing, which is one of my last disappointments is that I wasn't able to gain any traction about the idea of extending the southern node, of having the southern node be a much larger node. In fact, extending it from the Berkeley border all the way to Solano Avenue. I was just looking at a Google map. We have the town center development, which is a single-story, completely through lot development, which borders on an apartment building on the other side. That would be a perfect place for, if someone actually wanted to go 8 stories, that would be a place where 8 stories would affect very few people in terms of shading, et cetera. And then we have we already have the 4-story building at Solano and San Pablo, the condo building. We have a 4-story building at the other end with the senior housing near the Berkeley border. I think that whole stretch, I would rather see that be very dense as well. And I might speak to that at the council meeting as well. I'd love to see that whole area be a node, but I've spoken about that before. I haven't gotten the traction, so I won't belabor that any further. But I'm happy to vote yes on this plan, and would turn it back to my commission to see if there's any final comments or a motion at this time. Waddy,
Sure. I'm happy to go ahead and make a motion if it looks like we're winding down. So with that, I will go ahead and make a motion to let's see, there's a lot of different actions here. I think it's a three-parter, but certainly staff tell me if I'm getting this wrong. But recommend that the Planning and Zoning Commission approve the following resolutions, including A, Resolution 2022-03, recommending adoption of amendments of the general plan and an addendum to the general plan environmental impact report to the City Council. Item B, Resolution 2022-04, recommending adoption of the San Pablo Avenue Specific Plan, design guidelines and objective standards and community benefits to the City Council. And C, Resolution 2022-05, recommending adoption of the Planning and Zoning Code amendments to the City Council.
Well, if that's all fine with staff in that order, I'm happy to second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion on this item, or does any commissioner need to pull one of those for a different vote than the others? Seeing no on the discussion or pulling an individual item, so we'll vote on those three resolutions as a group. Then I'll go ahead and do this as a polling motion, just so the public and everyone is very clear on the vote. And I'll just go as people appear on my screen. Commissioner Waddy?
Aye.
Commissioner Moolman?
Yes.
Commissioner McLeod?
Yes.
Commissioner Donaldson?
No.
And I vote yes. And so the vote is 4-1 and those motions carry. And I thank everyone for their time and participation tonight, and to the attendees who are still here, thank you very much for your participation. And let me just go back to my agenda and see if there's any last items. Item 8, new business, there's none. Next meeting is July 13th, is item 9. And if there's nothing else, no last items from staff, then item 10 is we are adjourned. And thank you very much again, everybody, and good night.
Okay,
Thank
thanks
you,
everyone.
everyone.